Many people today underestimate just how deeply Christianity has shaped America. And it's not just within the church walls, but in the way that we think about power and money and politics and even each other. Even people who never stepped foot inside of a church can absorb these ideologies into their own lives and practice them without even realizing it. It's in our language, our laws, our culture, the stories we tell our children. The clearest example of this is Santa Claus. Because if Christianity can reshape Santa, a harmless, magical character, into an all seeing judge who rewards good behavior and punishes bad behavior, then you can only imagine what it's doing to our politics, our political imagination. And if you want to understand how Christian ideas seep into American culture, you don't have to look further than Santa Claus. Because Santa didn't start as a Christian character, and he still isn't a Christian character. But prior to the modern day Santa that we read about and tell kids about, Santa was a mix of pagan winter gods and Norse mythology and folklore. And none of these early versions that we see of Santa look anything like the Santa that we sell to kids today. But what has happened is that Santa was introduced to Christian culture. There became this kind of blending of Christianity and the story of Santa Claus to where Santa more so morphed into what Christians wanted him to be based on how they saw the world, their own worldview, rather than Christians adopting the original concept of Santa. And although we see a lot of evangelicals rejecting the idea of Santa Claus today, that is actually a very new concept. And for a very long time, Christian households had no problem promoting the concept of Santa to their children. And the concept of Santa that Christians are giving to their children are shaped by their own Christian culture. I mean, think about it. He sees everything, he knows everything, he can be pretty much everywhere all at once. He keeps a moral record. He rewards the obedient. He withholds good things from the disobedient. It's all about being good for Santa Claus so you will get your reward, which sounds a lot like being good for God so that you can go to heaven. And this is not just random. This is a very clear example of how something introduced into Christian culture will be Christian washed. And that's not necessarily to say that there are bad intentions from the everyday average Christian who is doing this, but it's just more so shows how when something is introduced into a Christian culture, Christians will just see it the way they see the world within their own Christian worldview, and that makes sense. And so people that don't go to church, people who aren't religious, they are introduced to Santa at a very early age, and he becomes their first exposure to this all-seeing, all-knowing authority who monitors your activity, who judges your behavior and your morality, and then he's going to either reward you or punish you based on how you behave. And it's soft and it's cute, but it's the same framework that Christianity uses for God and then also for political leaders. Santa is a gateway and an example of how religion doesn't just stay inside the church, but it kind of seeps out into our culture, into our society, and it impacts other parts of our society and culture, especially politics. And so, as an ex Christian, who grew up in the evangelical church and knows it very, very well, and who has been out of the church for many years and knows what it's like to be outside very, very well, I have a more well rounded perspective on this, on religion and politics, and how they are so intertwined in American culture and all over the world. And I think it's important to note that when I talk about the things I'm going to talk about, it's going to mostly relate to evangelical or fundamentalist Christian ideologies. There are 45,000 plus denominations of Christianity worldwide. And so it would be impossible to speak about Christianity and Christian ideologies and it apply to every flavor and brand. So today we're going to be focusing, just like we always do on my channel, on evangelical Christianity, conservative Christianity, the most common modern Christian ideologies that you see in America. So I want to start with might makes right, the idea that someone who is very powerful, someone who is in charge, is always right no matter what. One of the most important ways that Christian theology shapes American politics is through this very ancient, archaic idea that might makes right. In Christianity, God isn't just good because his actions are understandable or moral by human standards. He's good because he's powerful, because he created everything, because he is in charge. That is the foundational lesson that you learn growing up in the church, that authority equals righteousness and power equals goodness, and leadership is legitimate and good simply because it exists. Whenever I have conversations with Christians about God's power and his perfect nature, as they call it, I'll bring up all of the atrocities committed and commanded by God in the Bible. Things like punishing two people for eating a piece of fruit when they had no knowledge of what could really happen if they ate it, and then punishing all of humanity because of those two people eating a piece of fruit. Or what about when God commanded his people to march up to all of their neighbors and to make them a peace offering? And if they accept the peace offering, to enslave them all, to force them to be your slave. And if they refuse, then to just slaughter them and kill everyone. What about Noah's flood? When God drowns the entire world, he drowns humans and babies and animals and kills everything because he was just so mad about the way they turned out, even though he's God and he knows everything and knows the future and already knows how they're going to turn out. These are atrocities. These are evil. And if a human being did these things, if a human being commanded you to go up and kill pregnant women and kill babies, then we would call that a war crime. We would say you're evil and we'd lock you up. But when God does it, it's easily dismissible. Like you can just shrug it off and say, well, that's God. God is God. He's powerful. He created you. You don't get to question him. You don't get to judge his character or his morality because he's in charge and you're not.
The next verse says, shut up. That's what it says in the vernacular. On the contrary, who are you, O man, who answers back to God? The thing molded will not say to the molder, why did you make me like this? Will it? Pots don't talk back. Potter has the right over the clay. What if God, verse 22, willing to demonstrate his wrath and make his power known, endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? Do you understand that God has a right to put his wrath and his judgment and his justice and his fury on display to his own glory as much as he has a right to put his mercy and his grace on display to his own glory? Do you understand that God gets as much glory out of his wrath as he gets out of his grace?
So it becomes might makes right. Because God is in charge, no matter what he does, it's good. So it kind of makes the concept of morality and ethics completely pointless, because if we can't look at something and decide that it is good or bad because that something is more powerful than we are, then we're not actually exercising any kind of morality or referencing our ethics. What we're doing is obeying. We're just being obedient little drones. And this worldview, this idea of God, it extends beyond the church. It doesn't just stay within the church, because we see it all the time with Trump. Trump says terrible things. He does terrible things. He breaks the law. He breaks the Constitution. He is cruel. He is mean. He is crude. And yet Christians will defend it. They'll either ignore it because they kind of have to if they don't want to have to face what he's doing and saying, or they defend it because he's the president. He's who America put in charge, and he gets to make the rules and the decisions. Now, this disregards the actual job of the president, which is not to be our authority, but to be someone who is a leader for our country, someone that is to be held accountable by the people. But a lot of people don't see it that way. They just see he's in charge. He gets to do what he wants. And if he, has a team of people blowing up possibly innocent people in fishing boats because they are suspected drug traffickers and commits war crimes against them, well, he's the president. He gets to do that. And so you can see how when somebody grows up believing that the highest authority automatically is just moral, just because they're the highest authority. They're going to carry that logic into adulthood and they're going to apply it to other places. And so when a political leader comes along and he behaves like a biblical strongman and he utilizes God and the church and Christian language to prop himself up.
We're going to protect Christianity. And I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct, or we're going to protect it. You know? And I asked Jerry and I asked some of the folks, because I hear this is a major theme right here, but 2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17, that's the whole ball game.
And he is confident and domineering and unchallenged and won't take questions.
Quiet.
This is not a red flag. This is actually very familiar to many people who were either raised in the church or introduced to ideas in the church and have some of that already in their mind. It's just familiar. And this is why so many conservative Christians see Trump not as a flawed human, but as a chosen figure. God chose him, and whoever God chooses is from God. And they're not held to the same standard that everybody else is held to. If you grow up believing that it's wrong or even sinful to question or judge God and his character, then questioning or judging authority is going to feel just as wrong. You might not make the connection in your mind, but that is how your brain is going to respond to this kind of processing. And political accountability gets reframed as disrespect. They point their fingers and they say, how dare you criticize our president? How dare you judge what he's doing? Because he is your leader, he is your president, he's your authority. And so when you call Trump out, when you point out the absolute evil that comes from him and his administration, other people don't see that as you trying to hold the president accountable. Other people see that as you being bad, you being rebellious. You're just being a jerk.
Story today
It's
that
rough
he
in
wanted
Washington.
his generals
I
to
know
be
it's
like
hard
Hitler's.
in Washington. Oh, that's baloney. Come on. Do you really believe that? I've never heard him say such a thing. That's asinine. And even if he believed it, why would he say it? He's not that stupid. Sorry.
And so political accountability, it's reframed as disrespect, criticism becomes hate, and investigations become political persecution.
It's never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him.
And anytime there are consequences or potential consequences, Trump supporters see that as an attack from Trump's enemies, which is very similar to how they will see anyone who questions God, Jesus, and the entire Christian ideology. And this is why Trump supporters respond to every indictment as clear as they may be, as much evidence as there might be. They respond to it as if we're going after the chosen one. We're going after the one that God propped up. We're going after our authority, and we don't have the power to do that. And this is why so many Americans admire authoritarian leaders. It's why they prefer strength over competence when someone is just confident and does what he wants, but he's not very good at doing the job. It's why they believe that leaders don't owe anybody any explanations, because they are beholden to themselves and to God, and God is the one that put them there. They value dominance over empathy because empathy is weak and leaders are strong like God is. It's why cruelty can be mistaken for toughness. It's why political violence gets justified, because that's the exact same thing that happens in the Bible. All this cruelty and violence that God commanded and committed that's just what a leader does. That's what a strong leader does. If the highest authority in your worldview is entitled to unquestioned obedience, then all the layers underneath that are going to have that same immunity. They're going to inherit that same immunity. Pastors, teachers, governors, parents, it just kind of that hierarchy just kind of trickles down. Might makes right is not a political belief. It is a theological belief. And we should not be using theological processing and applying it to our government. These two things are supposed to be separate, separation of church and state. But the way they get away with it is by not being so blatant about it and instead marrying and intertwining politics and religion so that the waters get muddied and people just continue about the way they've always known. Their brain recognizes a pattern and it follows that pattern. And by the time they're in adulthood, they don't think twice about this might makes right idea because it's just in there, and it stays there until you actually question it and deconstruct it. And you realize that just because someone is powerful, just because someone has authority, it doesn't mean that they are good. And often those in power are not doing things that benefit other people. They're doing things that benefit themselves and their power. And so that's why it's even more important that those in power we hold accountable and we keep a check on, rather than just throwing up our hands and saying, well, they're in charge, so they get to do whatever they want to do. That is how you get a dictator and a tyrant. One of the biggest differences between conservatives and progressives comes down to how you view humans, how you view their nature. Are they naturally good with good intentions, or are they naturally bad with bad intentions? Christians, most of the time, believe that humans are born bad, sinful, depraved. From the moment you take your first breath, you only want to do bad things. That is your nature. And that is this concept of original sin. That's where it came from Adam and Eve. They were rebellious, and that was passed down to you. And so now you are naturally rebellious against God, and you've got to get right with him.
So the first Adam came, fell, and all of us in him go down with him, and we're born rebellious. You don't have to learn rebellion. You don't have to learn to sin. You are sinful. I was born sinning. You're born sinning.
And this single belief shapes so much of our government, our political policies, how we view healthcare and education and criminal justice. This is a big one because in Christianity, before you're old enough to talk, your heart is already wicked and deceitful. You cannot trust it. You are naturally selfish and you're naturally flawed. Everything good in you is credited to God's influence, and everything bad in you is credited to your sin nature and Satan's influence. So the default Christian worldview is that people cannot be trusted. People are not good, and they are naturally selfish. And unless they are Christian, which most Christians believe that very few, narrow is the gate, very few people are actually Christians, then that leaves the rest of humanity as bad, sinful, only out for themselves. So in order to get people to behave, they need discipline, rules, and control. And so if you grow up with this belief, and I think a lot of people hold this belief that aren't Christian. I meet them all the time. People who, if you were to ask them, do you believe people are generally good or generally bad? I think a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, humans suck. People suck. People are generally bad. I do not hold that view anymore. I used to for a very long time. But it has been through a lot of therapy and learning about humans, learning about psychology and sociology and mental illness and all kinds of different things that show me that they're not born bad, but they become corrupted and they become traumatized by the world and by other people. And a lot of times what happens to them is outside of their control. And sometimes it's easy to kind of combat that and become better or rise above it, but that's not always the case for everyone. Not everybody has that same opportunity or ability to rise above their own pain and trauma, especially if they've lived a really difficult life that has constantly beat them down and they don't have resources or people in their lives that lift them up and give them the opportunity for a better future. And so these people that believe that everyone is just naturally sinful and naturally bad and just out for themselves and are selfish, this is going to lead to you believing that welfare creates laziness, that people taking advantage of the system are prevalent and that most people that are receiving benefits from the system are doing so because they're just trying to get something for nothing. They're trying to, live off of other people's hard-earned taxpayer dollars. They'll believe that that poor people are poor because of their character or because they don't want to work, not because they are in a tough spot or they never really got the opportunity to get out of poverty because they were born in it. And that's a really tough thing to get out of when you're born into it. They'll believe that criminals always choose crime because they are bad with bad intentions rather than the reality, which is that the majority of crimes committed are financial crimes or property crimes because people are in a hard spot, because people are living in poverty. And that's not to make an excuse. It's just to explain why people do the things that they do. Some people believe that compassion is wasted on people and that most people will just abuse you and abuse your compassion. And so you should be very careful with who you give your compassion to, as if it's in short supply. And so these conservative policies are all built on this idea that people suck, people are bad, and anyone who is in a bad situation and in need of help is most likely doing it to themselves. And instead of getting a handout, instead of getting compassion, what they really need to do is pull themselves up, get to work, and do what the rest of us are doing and earn what they need rather than asking for it. As a progressive, I see people not as out to get something for nothing or lazy or bad. I see people as shaped by their trauma, their poverty, their lack of opportunity, their environments, their mental health barriers, education access, healthcare access. There are so many factors that create the people that we become. And I talk about in this channel historically, I've talked about personal responsibility and how I find it really difficult to place full responsibility on every individual for their lives because so much of what happens to us and shapes us is outside of our control. And how we respond to it is even sometimes outside of our control because the brain is a wild thing and we don't even know what's going on in there the majority of the time. And what we're thinking and what we're experiencing at the forefront is just a small part of all of the processes going on underneath that impact our behavior, impact how we live in the world. And so it's hard for me to say that people are solely responsible for themselves and everything that happens to them because I know that that's not true. And so in this worldview, people are not problems that you're supposed to control and put all these rules on. People are shaped by things that have happened to them, and our systems that are in place need to work better so that when people are in hard times or people are impacted by bad things, they can rise above it, they can get out of it, we can help them rather than shame them and punish them and make them feel as though they are fully responsible for everything that has happened to them. And it's funny because I think this is exactly what Jesus's worldview would have been according to his behaviors and the way he treated people. Because progressives believe that when you feed the poor, they thrive. They don't just keep taking handouts. They get better, they do better, they get a job, they make money, and then they don't have to rely on these support systems to eat because they can now feed themselves. And it is human nature, it is human psychology to want to be able to provide for yourself, to take care of yourself. And so most people don't want to receive handouts. Feeding people doesn't create a worse society, it doesn't create worse people. It gives people what they need so that they can do better, so that they can thrive. Progressives believe that when you provide people with health care and people aren't as sick, they also thrive. They do better. You have healthier, happier communities full of people that aren't going into debt because they get sick. Healthcare should be a human right. If we exist and we are alive and we are being poisoned by corporations, by all these things that poison our air, poison our water, and cause us to have health problems, then we should be afforded the healthcare that we need to survive those health problems and to do better. When you give people healthcare, you reduce crime rates. When people are healthier and they know that they can be well, then They don't resort to crime to pay for their medical bills. When you invest in children, then they improve as adults. They become more functioning, more productive members of society. When you support marginalized groups, then the communities in those groups grow and they do better. And so, in all of these situations where conservatives or Republicans will look at people and say, "Oh, you want healthcare because you don't want to work to pay for your healthcare. You want food because you don't want to work to pay for your food." That's the progressives look at people and they say, "Oh, you want more food because you're hungry and because when you don't eat, you can't really do much else. When you can't afford anything because you're not paid enough, then you're going to probably resort to crime just so you can survive. So we're going to pay you more." Um, it's a different way, it's a different worldview. I remember growing up in the church and being taught that we were not like the world, that Christians had a different worldview.
Everybody has a worldview. Really, the only question is, which worldview do you have? And so worldview is essentially the decision-making filter that every person has. We're trying to figure out who we are. How does the world work? How do I fit within it? Where am I going? What kind of life do I want to live? How can I live it? Those are all worldview questions because they're based on basic life principles, philosophical principles, if you will.
And they're right. They do have a very different worldview than I do. We see all of humanity and existence completely opposite ends of the spectrum. And the same goes for conservatives and progressives. Progressives look out and they see a bunch of people who have been beaten down by the system and oppressed and starved and their healthcare taken away. And they think, wow, if those people could just get some food and see a doctor and have a living wage, then those people might thrive. They might do better. But Republicans see those people and they say, well, if we give them food and healthcare and raise their wages, they're just going to keep asking for more and they're going to do less. But the data doesn't show that. The data shows that when you take care of people from the ground up, that you achieve the things you want, which is a happier, healthier, more successful, safer society. And it's not that progressives are naive. It's that we see humanity through a lens of psychology and sociology. We have data and science and facts to support this idea that helping people does not hurt a society, but it helps a society. Whereas Republicans are operating from, again, theology. And there is no data or science to back this up, that all these people are so bad and selfish and just want and want to take. There is nothing that backs that up, but Republicans are convinced and will have you convinced that that's exactly what the problem is. And so you now have two political parties that are trying to solve problems that come from completely different assumptions about human nature and how humans react to the solutions that you're offering. You have conservatives saying that when people suffer, well, they do better. They learn something. Whereas progressives see suffering as something that stunts our potential and our ability to thrive. Conservatives see people and say they need discipline, they need rules, they need control. Progressives see people and they say they need resources and support and compassion and care. So we're not just arguing about policy, we're actually arguing about the fundamental nature of humanity. And that is why this is such a difficult thing to approach. It's such a difficult conversation because we don't even see reality as the same. We're not operating from the same reality. Everything circles back to the question of, do we think that people need consequences and punishment and rules by the government? Or do we think that people need support and help and resources and someone to just show them a better way and give them the opportunity for a better way? And I think it's important also to let conservatives know, like, they don't have to be the most empathetic person in the world. They don't have to care about everyone else. You can literally spin progressive policy as a way to improve their lives, because if they want less crime, if they want a happier, healthier society to live in so that they can be happier and healthier, then they're going to want to help their neighbors, and they're going to want to make sure their neighbors have what they need to thrive so that their neighbors aren't committing crime in their streets. And once you believe that people are naturally bad, the next idea makes perfect sense, that people must be punished, not helped. See, in America, I don't believe that we have a justice system. We have a punishment system. And that comes straight out of the Bible, straight out of Christian theology. In Christianity, when somebody does something wrong, the answer is punishment. Sin must be paid for. You must experience consequences. And sure, you can be forgiven, but that's only after you get punished and you have to confess and do the repentance and change your life and, all of that. But first, you have to experience pain. And this just creates this worldview where consequences aren't just natural, they are moral, like they're rooted in our moral system. That in order to have a moral system, somebody does something bad, they must immediately be punished, and they have to really be punished so that they don't do that again. And so when you grow believing that wrongdoing must always be met with suffering, with punishment, then that becomes your instinct for every social problem. Crime needs harsher sentences. People who use drugs need to go to jail, not rehab. Poverty is a personal failure. You're suffering and poor because you made bad choices, not because you were born into them or because something bad happened to you to put you in that position. Homelessness and teen pregnancy, well, that's your own problem. You did that to yourself. So you should be shamed and you should be punished. If someone abandons their country and comes across a border to save themselves and their children, well, you have committed a crime. You've done something bad. And the fact that you were running across the border shows that you obviously did something bad in your life back home. And so you must also be punished, and in the harshest possible way. Even mental illness is something to be shamed, something that you must work to overcome. And if you don't, well, that's your own problem, and your mental illness is dismissed as a non-issue. And it's so funny when people say things like, oh, it's all in your head. And it's all in your head. Your head is your entire self. Your head is literally your existence. It is what controls everything about who you are and what you do and how you behave. And so when people say it's all in your head, they're literally saying it's all in your existence. It's all in the thing that your entire existence is wrapped up in, which is quite literally existential at the deepest possible level. And so we have this issue where we don't even see mental illness as something to have compassion for. That if you have mental illness and you're not working to fix it because you can't, because you're mentally ill, then that's your own problem and you deserve whatever comes your way because of it. And yes, we have a personal responsibility, but again, we got to weigh that. We have to weigh if somebody is solely responsible for every single thing in their life, or if there's some nuance there. And there are things that we are responsible as humans after we get the help and the resources that we need in order to even take that responsibility. In America, we have these privatized prisons. We have such a large population of prisoners compared to the population of people, compared to the prison populations all across the world. And we love to just lock people up and put them in jail. And rehabilitation to a lot of Americans feels wrong. It feels like it's not enough of a punishment, that you're being too kind to people that deserve to be punished. And so when progressives talk about ending mass incarceration or funding mental health support, many conservatives just hear that you want to reward bad people. You're rewarding their sins. Don't reward them, punish them, and they won't do it again. Because our justice system is not justice. It's not built on psychology and human nature. It's not built on science and data about how humans operate and why they do the things that they do. And it's not based on what actually reduces crime. And once you're in this system, it is very difficult to get out of the system. And a lot of people reoffend because they don't really have many other options, because of the system that is in place that has put them in such a predicament that they can't pull themselves up after being locked up. And so a lot of progressives will, propose the idea that maybe we need to support people, lift people up, and rehabilitate them rather than just sending them to a tiny jail cell with as little as possible. They say that, and Republicans scoff, and they can't believe that we would treat criminals in such a way. But the difference is that progressives don't see people as inherent criminals. They see people as needing more support. And punishment culture is not the only Christian idea that is shaping our politics, because if you believe that suffering is deserved, then wealth must also be deserved. What you work for is what you get. And that brings me to the next layer of Christian influence, which is the prosperity gospel. And this idea that God will reward you with wealth and prosperity if you are loyal to Him, which sounds very similar to a certain orange president that we have in office right now. But this is why America loves blaming the poor. America hates the poor. They love the wealthy. Overall, they worship billionaires and corporate CEOs. They think that they worked hard and earned what they have and that they deserve it. And they also believe that those who have nothing have not worked, have not earned it, and they deserve nothing. This is, I think, one of the most influential Christian ideas in our politics. And it's interesting because I grew up with the prosperity gospel, but I didn't realize it. And it's really something that you would think would only be reserved for like televangelists. But there are definitely levels of the prosperity gospel. You know, you have the televangelists who are multimillionaires who are getting people to just send them so much cash. If you send me cash, then you'll be wealthy too. God will reward you. And those are just a scam. But growing up, you know, we were not taught that being wealthy was a good thing. We were very much taught that you should not aim for wealth and prosperity, that you should aim to please God, even if you're poor. But at the same time, we were definitely taught that whenever you succeeded and you got the job and you made the money and you got the bonus, that was something to thank God for, that God blessed you. God rewarded you for being a loyal servant to Him. And so I think there are varying degrees of the prosperity gospel, but it is still there in the church because nobody in the church ever really gets upset with God for getting money, for becoming rich, or succeeding in life financially. People don't blame God for that. They thank God for that because God blessed them, and that is the prosperity gospel. And so if you're struggling or suffering or you're stuck in poverty, it is usually just framed as a test, or maybe you lack faith. Maybe if you just had a little more faith, God would give you a boost. Maybe it's the consequences of your sin, or it's just the result of your personal failure. But regardless, it's your fault. It's your problem, and you have to clean up the mess. You've got to claw your way out of poverty. It is not because somebody else did it to you. It's not because you are working a low wage job where your health insurance sucks and it doesn't cover anything, and you still have to pay out of pocket, and you still get denied claims while the insurance CEO makes $20 million a year denying your claims, and your CEO brings in millions and millions of dollars and takes the profits from your labor, buying himself all kinds of extravagant things that you'll never be able to buy in your life, and then uses the rest of their profits to lobby your government so that they don't have to pay you more, so that they don't have to give you better working conditions, and can continue to work you as hard as they want, exploiting your labor and paying you as little as possible. And I think there's definitely a disconnect between what Republicans say in their politics, how they kind of worship rich people and billionaires, thinking that they earned everything they have. There's a disconnect between that and what they say at the end of the day when they go home. Because I know that they get tired, they get exhausted, they haven't had any time off, they're working overtime, they're barely making enough to pay their bills, and they come home and they talk about how the boss just gets to make all of the money and work so little, and that, he works so much harder than his boss does, and he's so sick of it and he just wants a raise. But then we'll turn around when it comes to a political conversation on Facebook and talk about how billionaires earned what they have. And maybe if you want to make more money, you need to work for it. So there's definitely a disconnect there in how they feel and what they say. And if you believe that wealth comes from virtue and being good and earning it, then you, again, are going to believe that poverty is coming from the opposite. And so you're going to think that poor people are just irresponsible. They must have made bad choices. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't follow the rules. They deserve the consequences, and helping them is just going to reward them for being so lazy. Once you believe that poverty is a moral failure, then Every single safety net proposed is going to look like an unfair reward. It's going to look like somebody's trying to steal from you, the hard worker who has good ethics and morality. They're stealing from you to give the people that don't have good ethics, don't have morality, and aren't hard workers a handout. And so that's why conservatives will instinctively say that people will just take advantage if you give them a little bit, that welfare makes people lazy, that maybe they just need some tough love. You'll hear it all the time. My tax dollars shouldn't pay for someone else's mistakes. Why should my tax dollars go so that other people can have free stuff? It's an easy talking point, but it disregards the very real complexity of these systems that we live in and how they impact individuals, communities, and our society as a whole, and how those at the top, the wealthiest, are intentionally keeping us oppressed, intentionally staying far above us, and then feeding us this narrative that our inability to climb the ladder like they did, which most of them probably were just born into wealth or got lucky, they can just scoff at us, and we can scoff at one another, and we can kind of adopt this belief that they feed us that if we aren't like them, then that is our own fault, not the fault of them who are actively working, lobbying to keep it that way. And progressives just don't see poverty as a moral failure. They see it as a systemic failure, looking at wages and housing costs and healthcare costs and generational poverty and discrimination and trauma and mental health and child development and infrastructure. The list goes on. All of these things can contribute to who we are, how we behave, who we become, and what opportunities we have and don't have. The prosperity gospel explains so much about our political behavior, our hostility toward the poor, our resistance to social programs, moralizing economic inequality, blaming people for conditions they didn't choose. People think that they're talking about economics, but really what they're talking about, again, is theology. What about the concept of belief as a measure for morality? I've talked about this a lot on my channel. In American politics, people don't judge morality by behavior, they judge it by belief. And that comes straight out of Christianity. Because in Christianity, what you believe tells someone everything that they need to know about you and who you are as a person and your moral character. If you have two people standing side by side in front of an evangelical Christian, and that Christian knows nothing about these people, all they know is one thing, one answer to a question that these people give. Are you a Christian? Do you believe in Jesus? Two questions, I guess, but same question. Do you believe in Jesus? One person says, yes, I believe in Jesus and I am saved. The other person says, no, I do not believe in Jesus. I'm not religious. The evangelical Christian is most likely going to trust the Christian before they trust the non-Christian. And they might not know anything about these people and the things they've done, because it's not about who you are as a character. It's not about what you show in your life. It is about what you think about God, what you believe, because belief is the measure for your morality. You cannot be saved without believing. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes will be saved. It's not whoever is a good person with good intentions. It's whoever believes. And so your entire eternal salvation hinges on what you think, what you believe about God. And that transfers to everything, really. It transfers to everything, but politics especially, because it's kind of a shortcut to determining things about people, to forming opinions. You don't have to think too much. All you have to do is just see that someone who believes is good, someone who doesn't believe is bad. Because if you take all of your political values and ideas and someone disagrees with you, well, they're now in the other box. And what you believe is good and moral, what they believe is bad. And so now you are the good moral one, they are the bad one. You don't have to think anything of it. So if a Christian says, I am pro-life and I believe that women should not get abortions because it is a sin, and somebody comes along and they say, I believe that women should have access to abortion and life-saving medical care. Well, it doesn't matter that they care about human life. They care about women and suffering, and they care about the maternal death rate. When you allow women to get abortions rather than punishing them for it, you actually get less abortions. It's not about that. You don't have to think about any of that. All you have to know is that person believes differently than you do. And now suddenly they are a baby killer. They literally want to murder babies. And so in conservative circles, it's as easy as I'm a Christian, so I'm good. I'm a Republican, so I'm good. I love America, I'm good. I support Trump, I'm good. I vote red, I'm good. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter how they behave or what policies they want that actually helps people. It's all about, this is my identity, this is who I am, and it puts me on the good side. And this is why a Republican can watch a person like Trump lie and cheat and defraud people and say terrible, terrible things about women and marginalized communities and just overall be a disgusting person and say, well, he's a Republican. He professes to be a Christian. He is an American. He loves America. I mean, it's about what he says he believes, right? It's not about how he behaves. And so it's about his identity and what he claims his identity is rather than how he actually behaves. That takes precedent. All they see is red, Republican, Jesus, good. And that is honestly a very lazy way to form opinions about people, but it's common. And, I get it when you're living in such a crazy world with so much information, you got to shortcut wherever you can. But that is what they tend to do is they just see, what do you believe? What do you claim? I don't care about it, all of the rest. I don't even care about policy that benefits me as long as you claim the identity that I claim. Once belief equals morality, then actions lose any weight. And identity is all that's left and all that matters. And this is how people can simultaneously believe that Jesus loves the poor, and also cutting food stamps creates more lazy people that don't deserve any help, because they're not comparing actions to values. They are comparing team to team. Are you on team Jesus? Okay, you're good. Doesn't matter. No, the rest does not matter as long as you say you're on team Jesus. And this literally creates tribalism. This creates the divide between one side and the other, between Christians and ex-Christians or non-Christians, and between Republicans and Democrats, between conservatives and progressives, because you're going to hear Democrats are demonic, Republicans are God's warriors, Democrats are on Satan's side, and Republicans are on God's side. We're fighting for the soul of our nation. And so when you can look at someone who thinks differently, who has a different identity marker than you, and you can call them the villain, it eliminates all need for empathy, compromise, critical thinking, accountability, shared reality, any of that. It completely eliminates any kind of working together. It's like we've seen lately in Congress, where Republicans refuse to sit down with Democrats and compromise and negotiate. We saw that with the government shutdown, where Democrats were trying to talk about solutions, propose solutions to end the shutdown, and Republicans literally went home. They left DC because they didn't want to compromise. You don't sit down with the devil. You don't compromise with the devil, and they see us as the devil. And so to them, it makes perfect sense. Why would you sit down and compromise with people who are actually evil? Because they have made us villains in their mind based on their theology that is clothed in politics. Progressives, however, tend to judge morality based on people's behavior and how what they do impacts other people, their compassion and their ethics and the outcomes of the things that they do. Actually seeing how they behave and what comes of it. That is how we judge if someone is being moral or immoral. Are they causing harm? That is how I judge morality, is harm being caused. But within the Christian worldview, harm can be caused and it can still be moral as long as the one causing it is on the right side, on the good side, the godly side. ICE agents are working for Trump and are working for God. They're trying to, remove crime and get criminals out of here. And so they can literally run down a brown person in the street, not even knowing if they're undocumented, and tackle them to the ground and stand on their neck and nearly kill them and cause so much harm to them and their family and anybody who has to witness it. But it's okay that they did it because they are on the right side. They don't even think about the impact of the harm caused because the harm is caused in the name of good to them. And this is why scandals don't really change people's minds. You know, all the scandals Trump has been involved in and his cabinet, those scandals don't matter because identity is all that matters.
Bull. Trump ain't done that. Wrong thing Trump done is saved this country.
They're not going to let it stop. They can't stand the fact that he's running for president. And I am a Donald Trump fan.
It's probably altered, but it's just typical liberal propaganda.
It's why facts don't matter, why political forgiveness only extends to one side and not the other, why unity is demanded instead of accountability, because they're like, oh, well, we just need to come together and you need to get on our page, rather than we all need to work together to hold our leaders accountable. It's just a different way of seeing things, and it completely impacts how you want to approach all of the problems that we experience in the United States. Then there is the idea that doubt, questioning, critical thinking is sinful, is bad. And that's what I want to talk about next. We have to remember that a huge part of our culture was raised in environments that trained them to believe that doubt is dangerous, that questioning your authority is wrong and it's bad and something that should be punished. And so we don't. We don't practice critical thinking. We don't ask questions. We don't get curious, especially those of us that were raised in the evangelical church. I was raised to believe that my doubts could be planted there from Satan. And if I follow them, if I allow them to take over, then I could be committing sin and I could be doing something bad against God. That even if things don't make sense, if they don't align with my reality, if what I'm being taught in the church does not line up with what I think, believe, or see, then I am to push that down. I am to just have faith, just trust God. Do not lean on your own understanding. Your heart is deceitful and wicked. Don't trust it. So I can't trust myself. I can't trust my doubts. I can't trust my questions. And I just have to have faith and believe in the one in charge, God, and believe the ones that are working for the one in charge, like my pastor or my parents. These are the people that have authority over me. They know better. They're working on the right side, and I just need to get in line. That is how I was raised, and it's how so many people are raised, and not even just in the church, but just in American households. You know, you're taught like, don't question your parents, don't talk back. That happened to me a lot. Is I was such a curious kid. I would ask why all the time. I wanted why to everything. I just wanted to know everything. And sometimes I would ask why, and there would be pushback, like I was being disrespectful for questioning my authority, questioning my parent. And so what that did is it taught me, don't question, don't think about it. Lucky for me, I have ADHD. My mind is always going. It's always questioning and spinning. And so I could not help the fact that my mind did that. It is quite literally part of my programming and it's not something I can get rid of. And so no matter how hard I tried to push down the doubt and the questions, I couldn't. They just resurfaced because I would obsess over them. And a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have ADHD. They don't have a natural curiosity, and they've been trained not to think too much, not to question. I can't tell you how many times people have accused me of thinking too much just because I'm asking questions about theology. And so there's this attitude that to question is to disrespect, to rebel, and it is bad. And so what does that leave? Obedience. It leaves obedience to authority rather than accountability, questioning authority. You just go along with whatever the authority says. And curiosity is annoying. Curiosity is something that should be punished or shamed. How dare you ask so many questions? And so this will create adults who equate reasoning, like just going through the process of reasoning, they equate that to disrespect and danger and pride and sin. You think you're better than God. You think you know better than President Trump. It puts people in a position where they see you ask a question and they automatically think that you are being disrespectful to them and to the system that they support, instead of just trying to get clarification. And so it puts people's defenses up and then they fight rather than actually just having the conversation. And so if you grow up believing that questions are bad, you don't magically become a critical thinker when you turn 18 and become an adult. That follows you into adulthood and it becomes your instinct. And you learn to just automatically trust authority. Whoever's in charge gets my trust. You avoid asking uncomfortable questions. You feel anxious when you challenge leaders or authority because you think you don't know better than they do. You see people who are experts at something that might contradict, what your authority is telling you. You see them as threatening. You might distrust new information because that new information might contradict what you already know and what your authority has told you you're supposed to believe. And so critical thinking becomes a thing that feels like disloyalty to a lot of people. People really value loyalty to their side, their identity. And so once you start using critical thinking and asking questions, well, now you're being disloyal to the identity. And now you are put in the bad category. And this is why conspiracy theories thrive in religious environments and circles, because once that theory is perpetuated enough and it becomes a belief among the people in the group, if you question that, you are questioning the group and you are betraying your loyalty to that group. And authoritarians thrive under this mindset. They need you to believe that you cannot question, you cannot doubt, you cannot push back, because it's easier to control people that don't ask questions. It's easier to tell people what to do and they fall in line and do it, rather than pushing back and going, why am I doing this? What is the point? How does this serve me and my community? Instead, they just follow orders. And once upon a time, there were some people in Germany just following orders, and that did not work out so well for them. And so it's a very dangerous thing for people, but it's a great thing for authoritarians and dictators, because if they can convince you that just questioning what they're doing or saying is wrong and bad, and they can convince everyone else to point their fingers and shame you rather than joining you in your questioning, then they can literally get away with whatever they want. And so authoritarians will use absolute language and strong certainty and moralized statements and dividing statements and claims of persecution, that you're just coming after me, trying to destroy me because I am right, because I am in power, and you're my enemy. It's why Trump gets upset every time any consequences even start to come his way, and he acts like a victim. I'm being attacked. That is literally what authoritarians do, because it's very easy to get everyone on your side attacking that person rather than actually having to face accountability. Everyone has a little toolbox inside their mind of fallacious reasoning. It is full of all kinds of little tools we pull out when we don't want to think critically, we don't want to change our minds, and we want to kind of just stick our feet are right in our belief. And that's why I said foots, but stick our feet right in our belief without having to change. We might resort to cognitive dissonance. We might use whataboutism, or maybe a straw man. Like, we're going to kind of pull out all of these resources that our brain has that is protecting us from becoming immoral. Because when you're critical thinking and your curiosity becomes a moral failure and becomes something that's bad, then doing that is dangerous to your survival, because it means that you could become morally bad. And that opens up a whole can of worms that you don't want. If you were in Christianity, you don't want to be on the bad side, Satan's side, hell's side. If you're just in the American system and you have this mindset, then you don't want to be outcast from your society and your group and your identity. And so a lot of people don't realize that belief hinges so much on our identity, not on facts. And it's why you can just spew facts at someone that are verifiable facts, and they will literally just dismiss it all. They will resort to any kind of fallacious reasoning they can to avoid changing their mind, because changing your mind feels like a moral failure. It's not because they want to be ignorant. It's not because they are intentionally trying to disregard truth. It's not willful ignorance. It is the brain trying to protect that person from their moral failure, from questioning too much, which is a bad thing. And so they will defend their beliefs at any cost, because that is literally defending their existence, their identity, and their survival as a person. And so people double down when they're presented with evidence. They reject sources that challenge their worldview. They won't even look at them. They will trust only in-group information. They will treat truth as tribal, and they will refuse to update their beliefs because it protects them. It protects their identity. And unless they're in a situation where they feel free enough to just ask a question, to explore, to be curious, they might not ever change their mind or their perspective. And it's why I encourage curiosity so much. And I encourage people to kind of force curiosity on those that you want to think more or to change their mind, instead of just spewing facts at them, instead of telling them that they're wrong and shaming them and saying, you're wrong, you've got bad information, here are the facts. That shuts their brain down, and it actually validates their position as your enemy, because you're shaming them. And that's what an enemy does, is they point their fingers and they say you're bad. And so you're on the bad side and you're telling them this, and they're like, I know I'm on the good side. I'm on the godly side, the side that loves America. And so they shut down and they literally don't listen. And what you say is actually furthering the divide, and it's making them double down. It's just psychology. It's not an excuse. It's literally just psychology. It's how the brain works. And so instead, what you could do is literally force curiosity on them by asking questions. When they say they have a position, they believe in something. Oh, well, why? Where did you get that information from? How did you come to that conclusion? What process do you use, or what source do you use? How do you determine this? When you ask people those questions, they might shut down, but the brain picks it up and the brain starts trying to answer it. And they might go home and they might think on it, or they might want to prove you wrong, or, make themselves feel validated in where they stand. And so their own brain starts going through that process. And then if they do come to a point where new information comes their way, they might be more open to looking into it, because they feel as though they're doing this all on their own, that somebody didn't just feed them information and shame them into believing something. Instead, their brain had a question and it went to go get an answer. And now they have autonomy over their own process of determining what's real and what's not, what's true and what's fiction. And so it's more frustrating. It doesn't feel as good as just getting mad at someone who seems like they are intentionally being ignorant. But if you want the result of them changing their mind, if that is your actual goal, then psychology tells us that asking them questions and sparking their curiosity and providing them permission to question and room to think, instead of closing them down, making them small and shaming them, you're going to get such a better result from just sparking that curiosity. And you're going to get what you want, which is a person that might actually change their perspective and their mind on their own, in their own time. Anti-questioning culture is one of the biggest reasons that democracy struggles in the United States. And that's because democracy, it requires people to think critically, to be informed, and to be questioning and curious, and all of these things that they say is so bad. And the people that are telling you it's bad don't like democracy, because it means that everybody has their own mind and opinion and thought and input. What they want is to tell you what you are to believe, how you're to behave, what you're supposed to do. and you're supposed to just fall in line and do it because it benefits them. But if you start asking questions and getting curious, then you might disagree with them. Then you might push back. And then your friend might disagree with them after having a long conversation over coffee. And then suddenly those ideas are spreading out everywhere. Everyone is questioning and thinking and getting curious and pushing back. And now those in power no longer have power because we outnumber them with our curiosity and our questioning and our critical thinking. And so these authoritarians do not want you to think. They don't want you to think and ask questions. That hurts them. That hurts their agenda. Do the opposite of what they want. Ask a lot of questions. It does not hurt to ask a question. It does not hurt to doubt or to maybe hold accountable those that might be on your side. That's not a bad thing. That's actually a very good thing, and it's how we do democracy. It's how democracy succeeds as a system, is when each individual is free to explore, to think, to question, to doubt. You cannot have a healthy democracy without having people that believe that they can question their leaders, question their government, and explore ideas rather than just being fed ideas that they must accept and fall in line for. Another root of American authoritarianism that comes from the church is this submission. This idea that you must submit to those that are above you, this hierarchy that has been created. We see it in the Bible, the umbrella, the famous umbrella that many fundamentalists grew up with, which is you've got God at the top, and then you've got the husband, and then you have the wife, and then you have the kids. There is a hierarchy. I'm really bad at saying that word, hierarchy of individuals, and each one has a little more power over the other. This definitely is not contained within the church. We have all kinds of levels of power within our country and our society. If you've ever wondered why Christians feel safer under authoritarianism and why they support it so much, it's helpful to know that so many of us, the majority of us, were raised in houses where that was normalized and that was good, is having someone as your authority, not being your own authority, but always having someone that's above you that you have to listen to, you have to obey, and who is being influenced by those above them. God is influencing the husband, and so the husband he's a good man because he is being influenced by God, and so his power over the woman is a good thing, not a bad thing, because she is, by obeying her husband, obeying God. Authority flows downward, and then obedience flows upward. It's the perfect system for anybody who wants to remain at the top and in control. And so the message is repeated constantly throughout the church and throughout our politics that you must submit and obey and trust us. We've got this. We're in charge, and you don't worry about everything else. Don't ask questions. Don't push back. We know more than you, and we'll take care of things, but you just need to submit, to listen, obey, get in line. And so this hierarchy doesn't really allow for individual autonomy. So autonomy doesn't really become something that's important to a lot of people who carry this mindset. And it trains people to associate order with goodness and morality, and hierarchy with safety. People feel safer under these systems because it is the system that they are used to. And so authoritarian leaders, to an individual in this mindset, they might seem strong and stable and decisive, godlike, comforting and familiar to the person who is used to that. And so even if these people are cruel and corrupt and incompetent, it doesn't matter because they are the ones in charge, and you can just fall in line like you always have. It's what the brain is used to doing. And democracy feels very uncomfortable to people that like this layered system, because democracy requires you to ask questions, to negotiate, to compromise. Democracy requires equality among everyone, not power structures and power imbalances. It requires the power to be distributed to everyone equally. It requires accountability and transparency from the bottom up. It requires those at the bottom to hold those at the top accountable. And that is so far from what you're taught in the church, that it is a foreign idea and a foreign concept to the person who believes that those in charge do not need to be held accountable by those that they are in charge over. And so a lot of times Americans do not want democracy. No matter how much they talk about freedom and democracy, they don't actually want it because it's a very uncomfortable thought that they have to be the ones that are holding their leaders accountable. And I think I can appreciate this mindset and why people fall into it, because it does make you feel it makes you feel as though somebody else is in control and you don't have to control your own life. You don't have the weight of the responsibility of your own life, that somebody else has got it. And so you don't need to hold them accountable or question because they're the ones that have this. It just takes that weight of responsibility off of you. And so I think a lot of people accept this without realizing that they are quite literally accepting authoritarianism. Like they will literally praise democracy and freedom. They'll sing all the American songs and put their hand on their heart and talk about how much, they love our country and the men who died for our freedoms and our democracy. And they'll say it. But when it comes to how they actually feel and what they want in practice, what feels more comfortable for them is not democracy. It's not holding leaders accountable. It is falling in line so that those above you can take care of you. Because in the Bible, God will take care of you if you submit to him and obey him. That's the reward you get. Unfortunately, when you get out into the real world, into the political world, and these political leaders are above you, they do not want what's best for you. They want what's best for them and their pockets and their rich friends. But if you don't recognize that, then all you see is an authority figure that takes care of you. And all of this leads to people fearing pluralism and equality and diversity, and also resentment toward marginalized communities because they're at the bottom of the hierarchy and they are trying to have an equal say with those above them, at least in the mind of the person that sees it this way. And so to them, they're looking at the people at the bottom. They're like, you can't judge me. I'm above you. And you definitely can't judge my leader because he's above both of us. Get in line. I mean, that's it might not be what they think at the surface, but that is the attitude that stems from this worldview. And so you have people that end up feeling resentment toward marginalized communities in defense of those in power. And it really should be the opposite. We should feel resentment towards those in power who aren't lifting up our marginalized communities, who are intentionally oppressing them further, pushing them to the bottom, and keeping them there so that they don't rise up and they don't find equal footing with everyone else. And then, of course, you have this very misogynistic, patriarchal mindset where man is at the top, woman's beneath him, and so men should hold the power, men should lead, women should submit. Leadership is masculine. So is authority. Authority is masculine. Questioning a man makes a woman rebellious. It makes her just like Eve, just like Jezebel. Challenging this hierarchy, it feels dangerous to a lot of people, and men are at the top and they deserve to be there. And so this attitude, you do not have to be Christian to hold this kind of attitude. Misogyny and patriarchy is in everyone, everywhere. So that's just very common. But it is very easy to just adopt this patriarchal standard. When you were raised in the church where men lead and women submit, women must be quiet in church and never teach a man. That just translates to politics. And there are women who believe that women shouldn't even be able to vote, that only men should be able to vote. And so having been on the other side, having gotten out of it, I sometimes look at it, I'm like, how could you ever be in that position? But I do understand it from a psychological perspective that when your brain is trained a certain way growing up, that's how it's going to be into adulthood until you have a serious shift in your perspective. And so people will instinctively look for masculine qualities in political leaders like dominance and aggression and decisiveness and refusal to negotiate and refusal to bend and apologize and no compromise, because that is strength. You got to stand strong and where you are, and to waver or to change your mind or to think about things might be a little bit more of a feminine trait. And that is something that is not good. It's not good because, well, women are we're underneath there. We might not be at the bottom, but we're pretty much at the bottom. And so that's why you see like gentle, empathetic, and collaborative leaders are often painted as weak, through this patriarchal lens, because even if they have very strong policies and values and they can propose solutions that actually help people and lift them up, if it's too soft or weak, it doesn't look strong enough, it doesn't look like a leader, and it doesn't align with what people are used to seeing in this hierarchy. Empathy is weakness, because the moment you start to empathize is the moment you start to show compassion, and you might show compassion on someone that doesn't deserve it, and that doesn't help anyone. So empathy is toxic according to a lot of Christians. You can ask Allie B. Stuckey, who wrote a whole book on how empathy is toxic, even though she is a professing Christian. I mean, even democracy is something to question and scoff at. I've seen it more and more these days. It's kind of scary that a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, we're not a democracy. We're a republic," which the whole point of a republic is democracy. But to them, democracy does not seem ideal because everybody gets a voice and a vote and a choice, and that can be a little too chaotic. We need someone to make all the decisions and to be strong in them, and not to waver if they hear an idea that might be different to what they're proposing. People that are raised like this, whether in the church or just with these ideologies in their home growing up and in their community, um, authoritarianism does not feel oppressive. It feels very familiar and it feels right. And even if they don't recognize it as such, that's exactly what's going on in their brain. They're just gravitating toward what their brain knows as familiar and how things have always been. And anything that's different is wrong or threatening. There is another belief within Christianity that really impacts how people see the future and see climate change and how they want to leave the world. And I've talked about this in a previous video. I think it was when heaven justifies harm, something like that, where I talk about how this concept that in the afterlife you're going to get your reward, that suffering here is temporary, this life is just a vapor, it won't last very long. You don't have to really care about the future and about future generations, especially if you're an evangelical Christian and you really do believe that Jesus is coming back, that this world is going to hell, that it's going to fall apart. There is no saving it. And you just have to live your life. You've got to get through this life that sucks. And then at the end of it, you get to go to heaven and you get to live with Jesus forever. And there's no more suffering. There's no more sadness. You'll get your reward. You'll never have to worry about anything again. You don't have to work. You don't have to worry about healthcare or food or anything like that. And this world will just be a passing thing. And so when you have that worldview, you really don't care about climate. You don't care about the future generations. You don't care about the planet, because this is just some temporary illusion. It's it's not something to cherish or protect or take care of. And it was like when the Senator Joni Ernst, when she talked about how, oh, well, we're all going to die. People are like, we're going to die because you're enacting policies that are going to kill us. She's like, oh, well, we're all going to die. Well, she said that because she knows at the end of this, or she thinks at the end of this, she gets to go to heaven. And anyone on her side also gets to go to heaven. So their suffering is not a big deal because it's temporary. And God put them there, put them in that situation. If they can't afford to eat and they're struggling, well, they just got to get through it. And maybe they did it to themselves, or maybe God's just putting them through a test. But, don't worry, one day you won't suffer anymore. So get over it. For those that aren't Christian and are going to hell at the end of this, those people don't deserve help anyway, because if God is going to send them to hell at the end of this, well, then why do we need to show them any kindness here on earth? They're going to get what they deserve. And if they're suffering here now, it's probably because they don't know Jesus, and they have brought it upon themselves. So no matter what you do, it doesn't matter, because at the end of all of this, it'll all be gone. And you don't have to protect the planet. You don't have to clean it up. You don't have to worry about the climate, because Jesus is going to come back long before the planet can be destroyed. And when it is destroyed, it's because Jesus destroyed it. So this is why we don't want Christians or evangelical Christians using their theology and their Christian beliefs to form policies, because if they do, they're literally not going to care about the well-being of others. They're not going to care about our future and the health of our planet. They're only going to care about the here and the now. And when it's all over with, they're saved. And, if they did anything bad on this life, well, Jesus saved them. Don't worry. He died on a cross and they said the prayer and they believe. So they're on the good side. They'll go to heaven and everything's fine and dandy. They think that things have to get worse before they get better. That is literally biblical prophecy, that the world is going to go to hell before it gets better. And so, in a really sick, twisted way, many Christians find a lot of joy and glee from knowing that there are so many people suffering and that things are as bad as they are, even though crime rates around the world are dropping and in a lot of ways we have improved. They don't see that. They think that everything is getting worse, that crime is getting worse and people are getting worse. And, that is the result of sin. And it is a sign that soon Jesus will be back and fix it all. So they almost want suffering. They want things to go really bad, even if they don't realize it, because that validates where they stand, that Jesus is coming back and the Bible is true. I mean, even natural disasters, when a natural disaster comes through, there are Christians that believe that that was God's punishment on the world, that he did that, he caused that, and they praise him as the good guy. Might makes right. So any suffering is just in God's hands. It's God's plan, and it's a good thing. So that's not a great worldview or ideology to hold when you are making policies that are supposed to enrich our lives and give us a better future. And I think it's really interesting how so often as an atheist, people have accused me of being a nihilist. If there's no God and there's no heaven, then what's the point of all this? Why do you even do good things? Why live? Why do you care? You're a nihilist. Nothing matters. There's no point or purpose to this existence. And I think that is so funny because I find so much purpose in this life and meaning in my existence, even if it's purpose and meaning that I make for myself. But I genuinely believe that it is Christians who are the true nihilists, or at least evangelical Christians that have a very, fundamentalist biblical worldview. They are the nihilists because they don't care about anything in this life but looking to the afterlife, the next life. I was raised by Christians that hoped that they wouldn't even live out this life, that Jesus would come back in their lifetime and they'd go to heaven. Christians that would say, "Oh, I'm just ready to get out of this life and get to heaven." They don't appreciate this life because it's not worth appreciating, because it's a place full of suffering and sin and Satan. And so why would you care about climate change and rising oceans and extinction and the next generation and public health and poverty and all of these things? Why would you even care about those things if this is all temporary and it's a vapor and you're just going to go to heaven at the end of it and none of that will matter anyway? It will all be in the past. When you're on your 5 billionth year in heaven, jumping around and dancing with Jesus, not suffering, are you really going to remember what happened on this earth? And are you really going to care at all? It's not, it won't matter. None of this will matter. So if we're talking about nihilism, I think that those who think that nothing on this earth really matters and that all of the suffering is just going to fade away one day and you don't actually have to fix it. You don't have to take care of the planet. That is a truly sad and nihilistic view of existence on this earth. And authoritarians have a very unique tactic in this, because while people are saying, the world is going to hell in a handbasket and Jesus is coming back to save us, they also are human and they recognize that they're living amongst suffering, living amongst crime and all of that stuff, and they don't like it. And the authoritarian jumps in to save the day. He says, "Only I can save you. Only I can fix it. I was right about everything." They're saying the world is getting darker and there's crime all around and there are evil men running down in the streets and hitting old ladies with baseball bats on a regular basis. It's just so bad.
And if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old.
And the end is coming. And You got to choose a side because it's us versus them. It's good versus evil. And I am on the good side. Remember, I'm here to save you. And I'm the only one who can save you. And so there's a disconnect. There always is a disconnect in theology and how people actually feel and their reality. But it's the mindset that shapes how they see things that makes them vote in policy that doesn't really help them because it doesn't really matter in the long run. But also they do feel the impacts of living amongst all of these terrible things they're talking about. And so when somebody comes in to save the day and say only I can save you, and validates their idea that everything is so bad all around them, even if it's really not, that kind of that solidifies where they stand, what they believe, and it draws them to the one that's coming in to save the day, the one that's on their side. And so if you believe you're living in the final days, this final battle between good and evil, you don't really want nuance. You don't want policy that kind of kicks in and slowly lifts us all up and gives us equality and fixes things. What you want is a warrior to come in and to fight your battle and for all the good guys to win in the end, and then you all float up to heaven without your clothes. And then there's another Christian idea that really seeps into our culture, and that is purity. Purity is a really big topic. It was definitely one for millennials that were raised in the church. Um, and purity leads to obsession over controlling people's bodies, their sexuality, and their personal lives because you believe that purity is the ultimate goal, that everyone should be pure, and we should be working to purify everyone. I mean, it's kind of the Christian way, right? That we're all tainted by sin, and you need Jesus's blood to come in and wash it all away and make you pure again. It's the same concept. It's just translated to politics, to our government. In Christianity, especially evangelical Christianity, purity is not. It's not just your behavior, it's like your identity. Like you have to become pure, become clean. And it literally defines your value, your worth, your goodness, how acceptable you are to those around you and to God and to your authority. These purity messages, I heard so much growing up. I grew up in the purity culture. True love waits. I had a purity ring where I promised to save myself for marriage. Didn't work out so well. These messages that were taught in the church surrounding purity is that sex is very dangerous. It's not. It's only a good thing between a married Christian man and a married Christian woman who are married to each other. But otherwise, outside of that, it is very dangerous. It's very sinful. It's very bad. So is desire, having a desire for someone, to lust after someone is to literally commit adultery. So it's the same as cheating on your partner if you just have lust for someone, something that you really can't help that just kind of pops into your brain, because the same God that is telling you your lust is bad is the same God that programmed your sexuality. But that is how they see it. Desire is bad. Don't desire, don't lust. Women must be modest because if they're not, they might cause someone to lust. And if a woman is not modest and it sparks something in a man's head, well, then he is stumbling over that. He is committing adultery and sin, and it is her fault for tempting him, for creating those thoughts inside his mind. Gender roles are so important because it's part of the hierarchy. If you don't have gender roles, then how do you create the system where somebody is above another person, right? You have to have that layered hierarchy, and so you have to have strict gender roles, and those within the gender have to behave accordingly to those roles, those expectations, and you definitely don't want to, switch your gender up. You have to stay with the genitals you were given at birth unless you were born intersex, and then I don't know what they want you to do.
Intersex people exist. Intersex people exist. Do intersex people exist?
But purity is not about morality. They think that it is, but it's not. It's about control. It becomes about regulating everything, about your sexuality and about your sexual identity, about your gender identity, regulating your desire, regulating your behaviors, your body, what you do with your body in your own time, in your own home. These things should be regulated because if not, then people will not be pure. And if people are not pure, then you have a more corrupt society. And it doesn't matter that the president of the United States has raped women. It doesn't matter that he speaks of women in very sexualized ways, including his own daughter.
Okay, Ivanka, what's the favorite thing you have in common with your father?
Either real estate or golf.
Donald, with your daughter?
Well, I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that
Because he is the man and he doesn't need to be regulated so much. He's the leader in charge, the guy in charge. So everyone else needs to be regulated. But we're going to dismiss all of this other non-regulated sexuality coming from the man in charge. And so people who are raised in purity culture or around purity culture, they don't magically leave it behind when they grow up. It follows them. And unless they question it and change their mind, then that sticks there. And it might fade a little bit. They might not be as religious, but those programmed ideas inside the mind are very deep and they stick for a very long time, if not throughout the lifetime. And so you might distrust bodily autonomy, this idea that you are in charge of your own body, that you were born into it without your consent, and you should have full control over what happens to your body, and nobody else should get to tell you that you can't do something to your body. You might moralize sexuality, which is very common. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian or religious to moralize sexuality and to see sexuality as something that you're supposed to attach ethics and morals to. You might fear people who are different, who look different, or don't fit within the expected gender roles because your brain is like, this is not familiar. This isn't adding up. This isn't what I learned and what I know about reality. You might believe that certain choices that should be one's own to make should be made illegal. You might support laws that control personal behavior. So you don't have to have been raised in purity culture for purity culture to be raising you and to be impacting how you vote and what policies you support. I have met a lot of people that do not support a woman's right to get an abortion, and they are not religious at all, but they just have fallen for this idea that a woman's body is not her own and that our bodies are not our own. They must be regulated. And so that is so common in our society. Again, you don't have to be religious to believe it. It's just something some people believe and some people think, and it follows them. And until they really think about autonomy and power over your own body, they're just going to keep believing what they've always believed and thinking that anything different than that is a threat to their lifestyle, a threat to their government or their society. Purity culture has a big grip on a lot of people, and people see being pure as being moral and being good. And so if you are impure, if you are sexually deviant, if you don't fit inside gender roles, any kind of deviation from the norm, it makes you bad. It makes you not fit for society. And it means that you're going to contribute to society in a negative way. And that is how the brain processes that and the pattern that it creates. And so this leads to all kinds of issues, regarding abortion and LGBTQ rights. When it comes to queer people and their existence, purity culture says that they don't really deserve the right to exist and to be, because what they're trying to be is impure and bad. So you have purity culture telling us that there's only two genders, that gender roles are God ordained, and that you must adhere to them in order to be good and pure. That deviations from these roles are very sinful, and that purity must be protected so that you don't become corrupted. And if you become corrupted, then you're going to corrupt others, and then it's like a domino effect. So then you have a whole corrupt society. And believing that children need to be shielded from impurity. They have to be shielded from any idea that they can become impure like that. And so what this does is this this turns into laws and policies that target LGBTQ people, targets queer people, not because they're bad, not because they are criminal or harming people, but because they are not pure. They are not on the right side, and that they have become corrupted. And so this is why you see laws against gender affirming care, even though gender affirming care is proven to reduce suicide and to help mental health. It's why you see them attacking drag performances. They have no problem with the fact that there are half clothed Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders shaking and dancing for children, like a stadium full of children. They don't have a problem with that because those are straight women that are doing it. But the moment it becomes a drag queen that's doing it, well, they're not fitting into the right gender roles, which means they are impure and they are corrupt. So what you're watching is not entertainment. You're watching corruption and you're being corrupted by it. And so that's why you get these like laws that are anti-trans laws. Trans people are not more likely to commit crimes, to assault people, to harm kids. In fact, straight Republican men are more likely to do those things, but they're treated as if they are criminal because what they're doing is it goes against purity. It goes against this kind of moral thing that we're supposed to adhere to, that is invisible and made up, but it is the way that it's supposed to be. And if you're not that way, then you are corrupt. I mean, it's the whole issue surrounding bathrooms and books in schools and marriage rights and adoption rights. All of this stems from purity culture and how people view gender and how people view purity versus corruption. And none of these policies or laws are scientific. None of them come from data. None of them come from reducing crime, because they don't. They're fully, completely derived from Christian ideology and religious ideology and teaching. Anything that requires one to adhere to specific standards of gender and sexuality that might not even be natural, but are created by those in power and created by the church. And because purity culture relies on shame and silencing, rather than being curious and helping people, you just shame them when they don't fit into your purity mold. This turns into the book bans and removing sex education and banning discussion about identity and gender and limiting what teachers can say and punishing students when they express themselves. All of these things come from this idea that if someone is impure and corrupt, they must be shamed rather than talked to or helped or shown compassion. And of course, purity culture is deeply patriarchal. And so women are being taught that their bodies exist for men. And so whatever men want for their bodies, that's what is good. And whatever is good for God, men having babies, that's what women are good for. That's what women's bodies are for. And if your body isn't being used to satisfy a man, to please God, or to have a child, then what you're doing with your body literally goes against God's design for you. And you are being bad. You were being a bad woman for not falling in line with what your body was designed for. It's very easy to believe that women must submit to men because they are created for men. Women shouldn't have sexual agency because their bodies are not their own, their bodies are God's. Women should be modest and not create this impurity in the minds of men, causing men to commit sexual assault and rape and to harm women because what were you wearing?
Look at my stomach. Look at my belly button. Look at my midsection. Look at this area down here, right? And they fit so tightly that if you have any semblance of a butt, yes, I'm being real, I'm being raw today. If you have any semblance of it, it's gonna accentuate it because the clothes are fitting so closely around your derriere that it's literally drawing our eyes to a particular part of your body.
Women's bodies are community property. So then the men can sit around a round table at the Capitol and they can make laws that regulate women's bodies and what they can do with them because their bodies are not their own. So the community gets to decide what the woman does with her body. Men don't face that same treatment. Men don't have groups of women sitting around discussing whether or not they should be allowed to do certain things with their bodies. They will never understand what that's like because they are the ones in charge and they're at the top. And so then you get abortion bans and birth control restrictions and slut shaming and obsession with virginity and punishment for autonomy, for having sexual autonomy or having bodily autonomy and doing what you need for your own body to be well or to survive or to live the life that you want to live. That is how this plays out in the real world and in our government. Once a culture normalizes controlling women's bodies through the church, controlling them through the law does not feel so extreme. It feels familiar and right. And so when you combine everything that we've talked about today, the hierarchy, the purity culture, the punishment mindset, belief as a measure for morality, and how we see all of this play out every single day in our politics, we can see that our politics have been shaped by theology. That is quite literally what's happening is people are going to church, and a lot of people are because there's a lot of Christians in America. They're going to church, they're being taught these things, they're absorbing them, their brains are learning how to process information according to what they're taught in the church. And they go out into the world and they talk with friends and they have kids and they share these ideas and other people pick up on them. Maybe people that aren't even in the church, that aren't religious, that weren't raised in these things. But then they have that paired with a government who really wants to use Christianity as a tool because, as we see, it helps them stay in power. And they come in and they're feeding you propaganda that aligns with what these people are saying and hearing in the church. They're getting the news to share these same kind of ideas. You get people all over that are adopting these ideas that they don't even realize are rooted in archaic religious ideologies rather than actual science, data, psychology, sociology. And a lot of people don't even realize that they are literally repeating theological talking points that came from an ancient text written by people in a different culture, a different time, thousands of years ago. And it's not rooted in reality at all or modern solutions to modern problems. And it just gets perpetuated and people just repeat it. And you repeat something enough, you believe it. And that is how we have this like complete like fusing of politics and religion and why they're so intertwined and they work together in almost every way. And why we have to be better about being curious, asking questions, thinking critically, being open, having open dialogue, and celebrating democracy and the concept that each person has their own ideas, their own values to add, their own solutions, and the goal is for all of us to work together as a community, as a society, to come together to celebrate our differences, to take in new ideas, to think about things we never thought about before, and to change according to the times, and to develop our government and our world around what we collectively come up with as a group. But you can't have that if you have a government that is telling you, this is what you think, this is what you believe, fall in line. Everybody that doesn't agree is your enemy, they're bad, they're Satan. Divide from them, get away from them. They are quite literally trying to keep us from the democratic norms, from unifying, coming together, and talking about our issues even when we disagree, because that's not helpful to those in power. It's only helpful to us, the people in America that are trying to survive, to live, to thrive, to have a better future, to figure out how to govern, what systems to put in place that are most beneficial to help us all. All of that, that comes from us being able to think for ourselves, to ask questions, to think about things. But a lot of people are just kind of walking through life not thinking. They're just told something. They go out in the world, they repeat it, they stick their feet in it, They plant themselves firmly in it, and anything that comes along to disrupt that, any new information is very easy to just close off, close your ears, close your eyes, don't listen, because it's coming from the bad side, and there's really no point in listening to the bad side because that bad side can corrupt you. So don't become corrupted, stay in line, do what you're told, go with the way things always are. I think a lot of times the brain assumes that is the way to survive, and sometimes it is. But if we had more people that were willing to question, doubt, explore, be curious, think about things, be exposed to new information, new ideas, to listen to other people that don't think like they do. If we had more of that, we would have a lot less of this seeping out of the church walls into our society. We would have less of religion in our politics. We would have less policies being determined by theology rather than what is actually backed by data and science and research and psychology and sociology. We would have a better future. We would have a better functioning society that benefits all people if we stopped letting the church decide how we look at the world, determining our worldview. And again, so many people don't even realize that the church is deciding that for them. It is just this very vague, complex marriage of our society with church culture because church culture is so prevalent. But there is a reason for that. There's a reason there's a lot of money in the church, and why politicians and governments favor the church so much, because it helps them achieve their goals, their agenda, their power, and their control. So, this is not a video to suggest why Christianity is bad, or why we don't need churches or don't need Christians, or why we shouldn't have Christians in government. I don't think that at all. I think that it's good to have Christians in government that actually read the red letters and follow the words of Jesus, because then they'll be progressive. But the goal is to showcase just how easily we adopt ideologies that might not be rooted in reality and fact, but rooted in theology. And we promote policies and solutions that do not benefit us, but benefit those in power and those with money. And if we all thought a little bit more and practice critical thinking, we wouldn't fall into these traps, and we'd have a better future. And so I care about this so much because I lived it. I grew up in these teachings and I absorbed them. And I saw how the church shaped my worldview, my life, my decisions, my voice, what I believed about myself and other people. And once I recognized the pattern in my own mind and how much this impacted how I see the world, even after leaving the church, I was still repeating these things I learned there. It really opened my eyes to how much this is, how prevalent this is in our society, and how many other people are just walking through life repeating these same things that I was taught in the church that I realized were not true, but they're repeating them because it's just the way society is. It's what they heard, and it sounded right when they heard it. And so I'm not making this video to attack anyone's faith. I'm making it so we can better understand the framework that's shaping our country. And when you better understand what's going on, you have a much easier time rising above it. It doesn't feel so big and difficult to go up against and to change. Because if we want a healthier, happier, more functional America, if we want people to have a better future, then we have to confront the beliefs that are beneath the surface that are driving these policies and driving this support of authoritarianism, of support of politicians and of people that do not have our best interests at heart, that do not want better for us, that do not care if we are better, because at the end of this, they think they're just going to go to heaven and we'll all be shit out of luck. We don't need those people running our government. We need people that actually care about people, that have compassion and empathy, and are working toward solutions and policies that are backed by science, research, and data, not by theology, not by some ancient dude's opinion of God thousands of years ago in a culture that we'll never know or experience, in a totally different world. Because that's not how you decide modern solutions to modern problems, is by looking to an ancient collection of texts that were probably mostly written as fairy tales, not as reality. And understanding the root of our politics, that is the first step toward changing things. You gotta kind of deroot it. You gotta, get it all up, get it out of there, examine it, look at what's going on, and then figure a better way forward. And that is why this conversation matters. And that is why I'm making this video today. And I hope that it might spark some curiosity. It might get your wheels turning. Maybe I give you something to think about that you've never considered before. One little seed planted, which is actually a metaphor that I got from my days in Christianity, is you plant the seed and then it grows. Plant the seeds of faith, tell somebody about Jesus, and then one day they might become a Christian, all because of that seed you planted. That's true. That's true. And that applies to this too, is just sharing how you feel, what you think, what you've learned from all your curiosity with someone else. That creates a domino effect that creates so much more change than you'll ever know. So that's why we should be having more good conversation, sharing our ideas, and always questioning everything we're taught, everything we're told, and everything that we believe. Thanks so much for watching. And if you like my channel and you want to see more content, I would ask that you please subscribe. A lot of people don't think that it's to subscribe. I am one of those people. I can't tell you how many channels I've been watching for a long time, and I'm like, I'm not subscribed to them. That happened with Tennessee Brando recently, and it might have been, sometimes it glitches out and you get unsubscribed from things. But I was on the Tennessee Brando channel and did an interview there, and I realized that I was not subscribed to Tennessee Brando. So I hit the subscribe button, and that helps him out a lot. And when you subscribe to my channel, it helps me out a lot. Commenting, watching to the end, sharing, interacting, all of those things help me out a lot. You can check out my merch on my merch shop if you want to help me out and support me. Another way is by donating on my page. Your donations help fund my channel. It helps fund my local activism, my chalk. If you're new here, you might not have seen that I do a lot of chalk protests and all kinds of other stuff. But your donations help me continue to do that, continue making content, and just keep going. But the best way to support me is to just subscribe, to watch my videos, and to share them, and to comment. Leave a like and leave a comment. That does help me a lot, and that is the best way you can support me. So I'll see you next time.